Hello, thank you for coming into this Bright Talk about myths related to pay. As I was scanning the folks who have registered for this webinar, I noticed that there's a really wide variety of companies, both large and small, plus many different functions and job titles and levels represented by people who have registered. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to cover 5 prevalent myths about how people are paid and how pay is perceived. And the content I cover will be explained without getting too much HR jargon. We'll talk in practical terms, not just theory. Here's what prompted me to offer this webinar. I work as an executive coach, and I've been hearing a lot this year from my clients about their frustrations in figuring out compensation. People in HR who do this for a living are frustrated by the evolution of how pay is perceived. And senior executives in all functions are wondering how to attract and retain talent, and they often misunderstand the role of pay in doing those things. And then there's sales. In sales, there's a long-held belief that's not exactly accurate regarding how money and motivation are tied together. So hearing all this, I wanted to tackle 5 myths about pay. We'll start with that one about sales, and then we'll discuss the other 4 that have broader application, still relevant for those of you who are in a sales function, but also more universal. But before we do that, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Deb Calvert. I'm the author of the bestseller, Discover Questions Get You Connected, and of the award-winning blogs, Connect to Lead, Connect to Win, and Connect to Sell. And based on that sentence alone, you may have guessed that connections are very important to me. So I'd be honored if you'd connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter or Google Plus or Facebook. My handle's on screen along with my email address. My company is People First Productivity Solutions. We build organizational strength by putting people first. I work as a coach, a trainer, and a consultant to help people improve their connections and to help organizations improve their people practices. For those of you who are new to Bright Talk, let me just point out a couple of features to you. First, be sure to notice in the upper left-hand corner, there's a link. It's called Attachments, and I've included some bonus resources there for you. I'll describe those a little more in depth as we go through the webinar. And second, you can subscribe to this channel, and if you do, you'll receive more content from me every month. Bright Talk makes it really, really easy to stay on top of what's new and relevant. Okay, well, enough of the commercial stuff. Let's get down to business. You know, people say money is everything when it comes to work, but the truth is, what the research tells us is that money isn't everything. In fact, this meta-analysis from 92 different quantitative studies says that, in fact, there's less than 2% overlap between pay and job satisfaction. And that's significant because we make the opposite assumption that people are happier in their work if they get paid more. And we think that if we pay them more, we can make them happier. And right off the bat here, I want to point out that that's absolutely not true. So I think it begs the question, though, if that is not true, then what is it? What matters as much as pay, or maybe even more than pay? And we know from Dave Ulrich, a HR consultant and guru, he wrote several books, including this one, The Why of Work. And his research says that there are other things that are at least as important as money when it comes to shaping employee meaning, the meaning that they attach to the work that they do. And those things, those non-financial rewards, include, in modern days, work flexibility and their opportunities to continue to grow and excel in the work they do, the work environment being positive, and their access to valued relationships. And it's true that this is even more prominent, more important to millennials. Recent graduates have said that they would rather work for a company with a positive social atmosphere. Get this, they'd rather work for a company with a positive social atmosphere, even if it means that they will earn lower pay. So these are some of the setup pieces I want to be pointing out to you as we tackle these 5 myths. And the first myth, the one that I said we'd start with, is the myth that all salespeople are money motivated. I can't tell you throughout my career in sales how many times I've heard this over and over again. Some people they believe that this is not only true, but they will use this as a basis of who they hire, that they only want salespeople who are driven by a strong desire to make more money. And while I can certainly understand the philosophy, the thought behind this, I adamantly disagree. I do not believe that all salespeople are money motivated. And further, I don't believe the best salespeople are purely money motivated. And whether you agree with me or not, here's what the research says. The Objective Management Group, Dave Curlin and the folks there, they've done the analysis. And they know that from their analysis less than a decade ago, 50% fewer salespeople today in more modern times are money motivated than what used to be the case in sales. So even if you hold fast to that belief, and even if you want to attract and bring in those salespeople who are money motivated, the truth is that there are fewer of them, and we've got to calibrate. We have to adjust to make sure that we are appealing to strong, successful salespeople, the ones who will bring you the income that you're looking for. We can't assume that they are only money motivated. You know, and if we think of it this way, there's a place where you can go too far. We've all been the buyers from or worked with the salespeople who are, in fact, too money motivated. They focus so singularly on what will it take to make the sale, to get the commission dollars in my pocket, that overextension of their money motivation causes all those negative stereotypes out there about the noble profession of selling. It's damaging not just to the profession, but also to the brand of an organization. And sometimes these are the folks internally who are absolutely a nightmare to work with, too. So there is such a thing, I believe, as being too money motivated. From an organizational standpoint, motivating with money is also risky. Think about it. Do you really want the amount of compensation to be the reason people come to your company? I think if that's all you've got to attract them, then you set yourself up. It's a slippery slope. Because face it, there will always be other companies who are willing to pay more for your top talent. And if that's true, then not only are you commoditizing yourself as an employer, but if you can't keep up, then you're going to be stuck with these highly compensated mid-level performers as your competitors are outbidding you for the best of the best. So it might just be a bad idea to make money the main reason that people are drawn to work for you. You know, but let me be very careful here to balance this out, because you do have to pay enough. You have to pay enough to retain and do some other things in addition to the amount that you're paying. So you get to be in control of all this, by the way. The way that you message about your compensation is very, very critical. The lack of money that you're paying is relative to the promised amount or the accustomed amount that people are expecting to be paid. You need to set reasonable expectations and to give salespeople, a path to make the money that they're accustomed to making for the equivalent effort in your company. But you do set those expectations regarding what is good pay and what is a lack of good pay. It's all going to be based on what you say and what your sellers experience over time. You want to be looking at this inwardly as much as you want to be looking outwardly at what your competitors are paying. Now, there are some triggers that result in this perception that there's a lack of money. And these are research-based, proven. The triggers that cause people to think that you are paying inadequately are, first of all, setting a ceiling or a cap on commission pay. And the second is ratcheting up a seller's quota when they've exceeded it in a previous year or a previous time period. So it's not quite accurate to say that all salespeople are money motivated. It's that they are more prone to demotivation when something between perception and reality causes a feeling that there's a lack of pay occurring. I think the big takeaway here when it comes to sales is to understand that there are other ways to attract and retain top salespeople, and much of that has to do with managing the message inside your own organization and being mindful of these perceptions when you set goals or when you change compensation plans and variable pay. Lack of money can be a significant demotivator that creates dissatisfaction, but the perception that there is a lack of money is mostly driven internally and not externally, as we more often tend to believe. Now, here are some other factors to consider. We're still in the sales realm. For salespeople, then, if it's not about the money alone, what else is it about? And in this case, it's that salespeople aren't any different when it comes to the sorts of things they might also be motivated by. So as I said, we'll come back to this. We'll be talking more universally about all employees after we look at a few other myths about pay. But first, let's wrap up on sales alone by taking a look at these numbers. These come from a Salesforce work study. And we already know this was borne out by the Objective Management Group research. 50% fewer salespeople are motivated by money today than they were less than a decade ago. And on top of that, nearly 40% of salespeople don't feel that they are appreciated at work. And 70% of sales reps are leaving not because of pay and not even because of their feelings regarding their appreciation level, but because they have poor relationships with their managers. And that's significant. Now, let me tackle these other 4 myths, and then we'll come back full circle to talk about how to address some of these issues. But let's put all the myths together first. The second myth is this. Your paycheck, the paycheck alone, is not the only way to show appreciation. What you see on screen there, that is a real quote. It's steered into my brain because I heard a manager say this many years ago, and since then, since being an employee, since being at a corporate Fortune 500 in HR, since being a consultant for the past 10 years or working with a lot of organizations, I've heard this more times than I've been able to count. It's not true that pay alone is enough. And this is not about entitled millennials who need extraordinary levels of affirmation. This is about all humans of all ages. People need to be encouraged and appreciated and recognized and affirmed and celebrated. See, paychecks, they go to everybody, and they're delivered on a regular schedule, and they're the requisite, they're the bare minimum expected exchange for the work being done. Work, where you get a paycheck, it's no different from anything else we do. An extra thank you goes a long way. Paychecks, they don't express appreciation, and paychecks are not sufficient for keeping people engaged and motivated. The myth that pay, no matter how generous, is enough, that's a dangerous myth. Over-relying on pay is a surefire way to lose good people. And that brings me to the third myth. May I please just say that if you're using salary bribes to keep people, stop it. Counteroffers are usually going to backfire on you. They send the wrong message to your organization and even to that individual that you've made a counteroffer to. They send the wrong message, and they usually end up driving people away more than they end up retaining people within your organization. Using pay to bar the door is not sustainable. It's commoditizing you as an employer, It's devaluing the relationships that you could be having with your employees. Give them some other reasons to choose to work with you and to stay with you as an organization. Consider this. These are the reasons that people leave, the top 4 reasons that people leave an organization. Now notice that these 4 come before number 5. Number 5 is inadequate compensation. Now you know, because you've conducted exit interviews, you know what people say. When they leave, they say, I found a job where I could make more money. But what Gallup has done in this research, and I think it's fascinating, what they've done is they have asked, what was it initially that caused you to go looking for that new job that paid you more money? And the need to make more money was number 5. The reason that people started looking for a job, inadequate compensation, was number 5. These 4 things that you see on screen preceded the desire to go look for a job more often than inadequate compensation preceded the job search. These are the 4 things that are more important than money when it comes to employee retention. And you'll notice that all 4 of these are directly linked to the manager's role and the interactions related to the employee feeling connected and able to succeed within the organization. These 4 things are all about employee enablement. By the way, if you have found that attachments button up in the upper left-hand corner, you'll notice that there's a link to another Bright Talk, and that Bright Talk goes deeper into this topic. It'll give you specific strategies for enabling your employees, for setting those expectations, those clear and consistent expectations, the pathway to success that people feel like they need, that feedback that they want from their manager. All right, well, on top of all that, additionally, it's important to realize that transparency and clarity about your pay philosophy really matters to people. Pay can work against you in the same way that it can work against sales departments. The perception of pay may drive people away more than the actual amount that you are compensating them. Now, this article, it analyzed 11 pay impact studies, and using all 11 of those studies, drew the conclusion that it's more important for people to understand how they were paid. More important than how much their raises were was why that was the amount and how that amount was derived. So making sure that you have a pay philosophy and that pay philosophy is something that is going to drive the decisions related to pay, and then being able to communicate about your pay philosophy, those are all more important than using pay willy-nilly or haphazardly to try to attract or retain your employees. Now, what I'd like to do here is talk a bit more about the notion of a pay philosophy. I think we need to contrast the way things used to be with the way things are now in order to create a modern and competitive pay philosophy. So that brings us to the 4th myth, which is that pay is equivalent to the job being done. And this is a really big myth. For many people, this is actually a little mind-blowing to think of these 3 things in these ways, but it's important in the modern workforce to acknowledge that pay no longer is equivalent to the job being done. And you can take a look at these 3 shifts that have already happened in the marketplace, and this is not new. This has been going on a lot of years. In 2001, McKinsey did a study, and then a book was published called The War for Talent that reported on that study, revealing these trends, and they've only become more prominent. We're 15 years deep into this, but many companies haven't adapted. However, the competition may have adapted, and the generational expectations underscore that need to adapt. So let's take it these 3 shifts. They've already happened in the marketplace. Many of us are just catching up, but these are shifts that will only continue to become more and more pronounced as boomers age out of the workforce. So the old school way of thinking, the old school way of doing things was that you paid for the job. You paid for the work being done today. But the new way of looking at this is that no, you pay for the person, the performance and the potential of the individual. And your pay philosophy reflects that. And old was that you paid for the scope of the job and the seniority on the job. The longer somebody was in the job, the more amount they made. But new is that value creation by an individual, regardless of job scope and seniority, that's what determines the amount of pay, which means that you could have people being paid an equivalent amount, although they may have many differences in the years of experience that they have in that role. Well, on top of that, the old is that there's internal equity. Everyone in the same job grade gets the same pay. And new is that it's market equity. You're paying what this individual could be earning elsewhere, on top of paying for performance and potential and the value creation that they bring. In other words, if we were to sum this up, it's not as cut and dried or formulaic when it comes to pay, but that you have to look at people on an individual basis. And for some, I realize for some that seems very unfair. Assessing the value of a person's contributions and value creation, it's not only subjective, but it's messy. But in this new reality, that's what it takes, and your pay philosophy will need to reflect that in some way. And by the way, employers, we're not the only ones who are making these subjective analyses. Our employees are doing this too. And here's what I mean by that. Beyond compensation and benefits, many companies now offer total rewards packages. And total rewards, if you've heard that term before but not been quite sure what that means, total rewards include everything the employee perceives to be of value resulting from the employment relationship they have with you. And with this total rewards package, well, again, it's become subjective because you can offer more real and tangible value plus more perceived or subjective value into your total rewards package. So you can put a dollar amount on salary, on your contribution to health care and other benefits like life insurance, profit sharing, other traditional comp and benefits that you may offer. But total rewards gives you freedom to add items that won't be quantifiable in exactly those same ways. For example, what's the value of offering an emerging leaders development program? That value is going to vary by each participant as they consider, well, what will I get out of it? How does it fit with my career? And how does it fit with my personal goals? How open will those employees, each and every one of them individually, how open will they be to truly benefiting from the program that you offer for emerging leaders? And then think about work at home and flex scheduling options, tuition reimbursement, an on-site gym or cafeteria, matching donations that you might make to nonprofit organizations. All of those have a cost to you, but you shouldn't assume that your cost is equivalent to the value each individual employee will assign to these benefits you're offering. See, for some, those extras you offer have absolutely no value because they don't want them or don't need them. And for others, the value perception is going to be significantly higher than your real costs. So, of course, the ultimate aim, the goals you have for your total rewards, in some combination, your aim will be to meet the needs of every employee. And additionally, you'll want your total rewards to work as a recruiting tool to be able to attract employees who will thrive in your organization. It helps to know, if you're going to figure all this out, it helps to know what people care most about in the traditional comp and benefits options, and to remember that value is highly personal. It's different for each and every individual. we can rely on research to give us some trends, to give us a starting point about what people value. And when we look at that research, it will be important to note that a pay raise is not number one for 85% of people responding. When you add in bonuses, we're still only at 25% of people naming some form of pay as the most important factor in considering a job. That's why it's so important to consider total rewards and to think about what else is going to attract and retain your top talent. To grasp this fully, it's probably about time we move on to our fifth myth. That myth is that money is the only universal reward, and that's absolutely wrong. Meaningful encouragement is the only universal reward. Encouragement has a lot more proof behind it to say that it will get you what you're looking for in terms of engagement, enablement, ennoblement. Encouragement is what you need to keep people interested in working for you and highly motivated to do so. Now, of course, that encouragement also takes different forms. If it's going to be meaningful and have value, it too must be personal. But praise, recognition, appreciation, affirmation, but believing in somebody, all of these are rewarding to people. And when we ask people to share a story about their most meaningful recognition in the workplace, they seldom describe an award or cash prize or pay raise. They almost always describe being entrusted with something, being recognized for something that meant a lot to them individually, or being personally appreciated for something specific that they had done. So you see, money, it's actually a cheap attempt to bypass something that's more meaningful and longer lasting. Your sincere gratitude and your expression of it counts for more when it comes to rewards. So those being the 5 high-level myths, now let's draw some conclusions. If we put these pieces of research together, we can draw some conclusions that disprove those 5 myths. First, doing something meaningful is more important than money or recognition. Those are the big 3. Doing something meaningful, the money I'm paid to do the work, and the recognition that I receive. And those are the big 3, so we can't focus on money alone. In addition to everything we've highlighted here, we might also want to focus on other traditional motivators, things that matter to people. And now on screen you see a list of those traditional motivational factors in the workplace. All of these motivate people, that is, some people in the workplace. Different things do motivate different people. And this is a list that, by and large, it will appear anytime you survey a work group and ask what motivates you at work. I ask that question when I conduct employee engagement, enablement, and ennoblement workshops, and the list I've posted here is what appeared on the flip chart the last time I asked a group this question and captured their responses. But it's very similar to every other list I've ever compiled and what the researchers' lists look like too. But I'd like to point out something very important on this list. I'm interpreting one and only one thing on this list as an intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic meaning the feeling that you've made a difference or could make a difference. That's the item from the list. And meaning that it's driven internally by something inside me as opposed to an extrinsic or external reward. But everything else on that list is more or less intrinsic. It comes from other people or from the workplace itself. Of course, if you've read Daniel Pink's book, Drive, or any of the other modern studies on motivation, you know that right there is problematic. People are motivated intrinsically far more effectively, more deeply, more sustainably than any extrinsic motivation. So I think we have to tackle that question, why then? Why does this list, when I ask this question over and over again, why do so many extrinsic motivators show up? And I think that it's because we don't even consider being internally motivated. We don't think about others being internally motivated. We go first to, as a manager, what should I be doing to motivate people? See, people have to be, when I do this exercise in workshops, people have to be reminded specifically. They have to be prompted before they'll shift and start listing intrinsic motivations and have that little moment of self-discovery that these things that are listed are nice to have, but they're not the ultimate drivers of their own behavior or performance. And we don't train managers in this way. We think when we're training managers that we have to tell them what they should be doing as external motivators. And that's why we talk so much about money. Money's the fastest, and it's seemingly the easiest way to try and motivate another person. So we get conditioned to think that way, and we even do this at home with our kids. We incentivize our kids with an allowance rather than tapping into an intrinsic motivation. Okay, so just think about the lost opportunity cost of no one knowing how to create an environment where people can find intrinsic motivation. Think about all the money lost on reward systems that ultimately diminish individual motivation. And think about all the feelings of lost self-determination and self-esteem when people begin to rely only on external or extrinsic motivation. It's really the difference between being able to ignite a spark and fan the flames inside someone versus constantly having to light a fire underneath them in order to get anything done. When you focus on positive intrinsic motivation, the results are always better. That motivation lasts longer. It becomes a self-sustaining fire. Let me illustrate this difference another way. We can put a simple little box model on this that might be useful. Now, what I've mapped here are two different things to help us understand four options for motivation. The first is that motivation, of course, it can be positive or negative. We call that carrot versus stick. And you can light a fire underneath someone with a negative motivation like fear or pressure. You can also motivate someone externally in a positive way with bribes. But both will have a limited impact. Some people won't respond at all. Others will respond for a while, but not over the long term. The second thing we're looking at here would be extrinsic versus intrinsic. Remember, extrinsic means from the outside. That is someone else who is pushing for or requesting or driving the motivation. And intrinsic means from the inside, where the individual is personally desiring something. And when you put those two dimensions together, you end up with four scenarios. You end up with positive extrinsic, negative extrinsic, positive intrinsic, and negative intrinsic. And those are illustrated by the four sorts of things that people would think about that, or things that people would hear. We've all done this in the workplace and elsewhere. We've used negative extrinsic, like you better finish that or you're fired, or you better finish that or your pay is going to be reflecting it, right? Negative extrinsic. We've used positive extrinsic. Hey, I would like you to do this, and if you do, I'll bonus you. Okay, that's positive. It's still external. And those are those are where the myths about pay come into play. Intrinsic, the individual wants it for themselves. Negative intrinsic, I hate this, I don't really care what happens, I don't want to do this. Positive intrinsic, I'm so excited, I'm eager to complete this. Well, none of these, including pay, none of these are going to do nearly as well in terms of motivating people as the upper right-hand box. But even so, companies and managers, they keep using extrinsic motivations, and they pay little heed to the situation of no extrinsic or intrinsic motivation. We just don't spend a lot of time talking about those lower boxes. Research, though, tells us that we should be doing less in the upper left And we should find ways instead to help position people so they're experiencing what's in the upper right-hand box. Here's one major way you can do that. If you want the people around you to be motivated intrinsically, motivated in a way that can be sustained, this is what you need to offer them. You need to create the environment and the opportunity where that intrinsic positive motivation can surface. You need to enable people. And the way you enable them is you give them stretch assignments and challenge them and get them into the flow zone where they're challenged, but they're into the work and it's rewarding to them just because of the way it makes them feel. And you need to give them choice in how they do their work, because when they are enabled and they have that degree of control, they will want to succeed. Intrinsically, that desire will surface. We, of course, want to help people. We want to give them a chance to help. We want to recognize and encourage them. We want to create an atmosphere where, by and large, people like each other, and it's a happy workplace, because that's motivating in and of itself. And being trusted and feeling like you can trust people around you, that, too, is a positive, intrinsic motivator. When people are challenged and trusted and happy at work, they will feel like the feeling in the upper right-hand box. They're into the work. They're approaching their work with thoughts like, I'm so excited about this project, and I'm eager to complete it. Now, I might suggest that you use what's on screen here as a self-assessment to rate your own workplace and the environment that you're contributing to. How many of these enablement factors are in place for your team? Because every one of these matters more than the amount of money that you're paying the members of your team. And again, this is 100% in control, in the hands of frontline managers. I can't overemphasize just how important the manager is in creating an environment where people can get intrinsically motivated. Instead of making it about pay, make it about your manager's connections with your employees. This is all about enabling and even ennobling your employees. And don't forget, there's an attachment with a whole other webinar that gives you details about how you can make that happen. Okay, so in short, an employee commitment is a retention tool, much more so than pay ever could be, and that employee commitment comes from the manager. The manager is key. Most managers don't spend enough time or the right kind of time with their direct reports. We can see that in this research that's on screen, what the cause and effect is. When managers take the time and they do the right activities and they have the right attributes to create an environment where people are intrinsically motivated, here's what happens. The emotional commitment to the manager soars. It goes up 77%. And because of that, the emotional commitment to the team increases, the emotional commitment to the organization increases, and to the job, to the work that needs to be done in the day-to-day, that commitment also goes up by a full third. A lot of this has to do with the way that a manager allocates their time. So I've given you an infographic. The other attachment that you see there is an infographic that describes how to allocate your time as a manager so that you are able to put more time into people practices. And people practices, they do merit more time than ways that you might otherwise be allocating your time presently. Now, this terminology, emotional commitment, it is significant because this is what you're aiming for. It all comes down to employee engagement. Employee engagement is defined as a heightened emotional connection that an employee feels toward their organization. And because of that heightened emotional connection, the employee is influenced to apply additional discretionary effort to their work. Here's the significance of employee engagement. When you have that heightened emotional connection, you retain employees longer. You don't have that revolving door, and you're not constantly needing to hire people and onboard them. And because they stick around longer and are more effective, and because they apply additional discretionary effort to their work, what you get from that, research tells us over and over again, is you get increased productivity, increased customer satisfaction, increased top-line revenue, and improvement in your bottom-line profit margins. So all of that comes from employee engagement. Please do take a look at other presentations I've posted here on Bright Talk if you'd like to know more about this research. It's all within those. There's a wealth of new research and some very thought-provoking information that can help you to go down this path and to do things deliberately that will boost engagement and have this domino effect of improving the retention rate in your organization, employee satisfaction, productivity, customer satisfaction, top and bottom line revenues. Okay, but for now, just know that only the manager and not the pay can give you all of these impacts. We could probably sum it up this way, and this brings us to a close just about. There is no significant difference in employee engagement by pay level. So if you want an engaged workforce, money simply isn't the answer. This is what Gallup found in findings from 1.4 million employees from 192 organizations across 49 industries and 34 nations. So this is universally true no matter what kind of work that you do, no matter where you're based. There's no significant difference in employee engagement by pay level. If you want that engaged workforce, money's not the answer. There are other things that you need to be doing instead. All right, in summary, we have busted these 5 myths. It is not true that all salespeople are money motivated. It is not true that the paycheck alone is adequate to express your appreciation for the work people are doing. It's absolutely not true that a pay increase is a good retention tool. It's no longer true that the pay can be equivalent to the work being done. There are other factors that need to be considered. And it's not true that money is the only universal reward. What you need to do is look at the alternatives to pay, to engage people by enabling them and ennobling them. That's the key. What you want to do is put people first to build organizational strength. Here at People First Productivity Solutions, we can help you. Connect with us and follow us and look at our other Bright Talks here and elsewhere for more information, for tips that will do more for your organization than pay could ever do. We'd be happy to take your questions via email. We'd be happy to connect with you via social media. Whatever way works for you, let us know what your questions are so that you can motivate your people and motivate them in a way intrinsically that will be sustainable and will help you to drive the success that you're looking for. Thank you for attending this Bright Talk with me, Deb Calvert. I look forward to hearing more from you. And of the award-winning blogs, Connect to Lead, Connect to Win, and Connect to Sell. And based on that sentence alone, you may have guessed that connections are very important to me. So I'd be honored if you'd connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter or Google Plus or Facebook. My handle's on screen along with my email address. My company is People First Productivity Solutions. We build organizational strength by putting people first. I work as a coach, a trainer, and a consultant to help people improve their connections and to help organizations improve their people practices. For those of you who are new to Bright Talk, let me just point out a couple of features to you. First, be sure to notice in the upper left-hand corner, there's a link. It's called Attachments, and I've included some bonus resources there. Absolutely not true. So I think it begs the question, though, if that is not true, then what is it? What matters as much as pay, or maybe even more than pay? And we know from Dave Ulrich, HR consultant and guru, he wrote several books, including this one, The Why of Work, and his research says that there are other things that are at least as important as money when it comes to shaping employee meaning, the meaning that they attach to the work that they do. And those things, those non-financial rewards, include, in modern days, work flexibility and their opportunities to continue to grow and excel in the work they do, the work environment being positive, and their access to valued relationships. And it's true that this is even more prominent, more important to millennials who do this for a living, are frustrated by the evolution of how pay is perceived. And senior executives in all functions are wondering how to attract and retain talent, and they often misunderstand the role of pay in doing those things. And then there's sales. In sales, there's a long-held belief that's not exactly accurate regarding how money and motivation are tied together. So hearing all this, I wanted to tackle 5 myths about pay. We'll start with that one about sales, and then we'll discuss the other 4 that have broader application, still relevant for those of you who are in a sales function, but also more universal. But before we do that, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Deb Calvert. I'm the author of the bestseller, Discover Questions Get You Connected. Hello, thank you for coming into this Bright Talk about myths related to pay. As I was scanning the folks who have registered for this webinar, I noticed that there's a really wide variety of companies, both large and small, plus many different functions and job titles and levels represented by people who have registered. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to cover 5 prevalent myths about how people are paid and how pay is perceived. And the content I cover will be explained without getting too much HR jargon. We'll talk in practical terms, not just theory. Here's what prompted me to offer this webinar. I work as an executive coach, and I've been hearing a lot this year from my clients about their frustrations in figuring out compensation. People in HR for you, I'll describe those a little more in depth as we go through the webinar. And second, you can subscribe to this channel, and if you do, you'll receive more content from me every month. Bright Talk makes it really, really easy to stay on top of what's new and relevant. Okay, well, enough of the commercial stuff. Let's get down to business. You know, people say money is everything when it comes to work, but the truth is, what the research tells us is that money isn't everything. In fact, this meta-analysis from 92 different quantitative studies says that, in fact, there's less than 2% overlap between pay and job satisfaction. And that's significant because we make the opposite assumption that people are happier in their work if they get paid more. And we think that if we pay them more, we can make them happier. And right off the bat here, I want to point out that that's